Welcome to the pod, Kenneth. Can you tell me a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So my name is Kenneth. I currently work in the UAE for Space42. I work there as the CIO. Basically, for what I do is we're post a merger, which happened just over a year ago. So as a company, as a new company, we're just over 1 year old. But it's two previously very well-known listed companies that were merged. What we're doing is we're basically providing space and telecommunication services, but also a bunch of smart solutions has to do with Earth observation and autonomous vehicles.
All right. That's exciting.
It's good fun.
Yeah. You say in one of your posts on LinkedIn that IT must evolve from a traditional cost center to a digital business enabler. What do you mean by that?
Oh yes, this is one of my my big points that I very often have conversations with, both with peers and across various industries. I think IT or the CIO role came from running infrastructure back in the days. If you could just go 10 years back, maybe. But today we run everything. Has everything to do with your full value chain of the company. I mean, you can hardly even run a farm today without having IT involved. But the farmer would never consider themselves as, hey, I have an IT department. But IT is just so integrated into everything. Same goes for basically any company that I've worked in. And this is where we're seeing the evolution also of the role, getting closer and closer to more or less being kind of a COO. Because it has a lot to do with both enabling the business to actually execute on the wishes, the strategy, but also securing that the daily operations, so the whole foundation. You have everything today with everything being so connected. You've got compliance, you've got cyber threats, you've got, productivity, efficiency. Now with the whole AI wave, how do we gain even more from that? How do you work with data? A lot of that touches the CIO role in the IT or digital function and has been for quite some time. And this is really where I truly believe that IT cannot be just a cost center, because then it cannot be the enabler. Then it's just a delivery function, which is also why when people talk about IT is a delivery or the customers is the business, I've always thought that was wrong because we're colleagues. And jointly, we'll make sure that we execute on what the business needs as a whole. But it's very, very different from what it used to be when it was just a delivery organization, somebody to make sure that network, print, and email was working. Today, we're involved in anything.
So on the enabler part, how can IT then enable the business?
Well, I think part of it is, again, how to change the status quo. I think this is also where the CIO role is very much different to what it was in the past. You can't just stick with this is what we used to do or have your holy cows to use, because they don't work anymore. Technology is also caught up with us. Ways of working, skill sets you need to have in your teams, the different types of roles and talent that you need to be able to attract, but with that also develop and retain. So I think as well that our role is also very different. And if you understand that, and you have those good and deep conversations with your peers in the business, being how do you want to drive, more online conversion? How do you want to, optimize or shave, lean out something in your production? How do you want to be looking at, introducing robots into your production facilities, into your logistics chains? How do you use now, AI agents? What can they actually be good for, and how can they help you? And bottom line, we all go to work basically to develop and grow the company. And we do that by us introducing a technology angle to it, and our business peers introducing their business acumen and their angles into it. And hopefully hand in hand, that's what actually develops the business, rather than just IT delivering what the business knows about technology. So enabling for me is really that we can be there in that conversation and help inspire them, knowing what we know, join that up with what they know, and together that's going to be a lot stronger and a lot more fruitful in terms of just saying, hey, I want something over there, it has to be green, and then you go back into the chamber, you deliver the green, and then the business says, no, I want it blue. It's like, yeah, I knew you wanted something else than green, but I was not in a position back then to have that conversation. And I think the companies that have understood that IT is no longer just a cost center, but is truly an enabler and works in a different way, I think they're seeing a lot more productive, but they're also a lot more efficient. And I think they're making more money effectively.
What do you think? How does that shift happen? Because from the CIO, most often would like that to happen, but might hit a wall in the dialogue with the business. How do you make that shift?
Well, sometimes it requires a disaster, so an incident of some sort that becomes the wake-up call. Other places I've witnessed is actually, leadership, board, realizing that, hey, we need to have this capability and these skill sets a lot closer to what we discuss and how we develop the business. I think there's a few boards that are now starting to realize, especially now with the NIS2 directive here in Europe, coming a lot more into effect. Saw some stats just the other day, which is a lot more, how do we do risk control, risk management? How do we do that properly? How do we understand our value chain and protect that? Which is why a lot of CEOs, fortunately, they are starting to see, okay, we need to have this not as a function under finance or commercial or where it might be sat, but we need to bring it into a different perspective. So I think there's two angles. There's the ones that understand it through leadership, and then there's the ones that need a wake-up call. I mean, you can point at a couple of pretty nameful Danish companies that have gone through pretty severe incident. And with that, they actually ended up changing it after that because they realized that, hey, we're too vulnerable. And exactly what is NIS2 about is, are you in control of your assets, your delivery, your business continuity? And who has the finger on all these elements? The IT function has that, right? So I know for those companies, the ones I speak to they're a lot more differently involved in those conversations than just being hey, here's a portfolio, can you please deliver these projects for us?
Is there something that the CIO can do more proactively? So waiting for disaster is, of course, maybe not the best way of approaching.
Not recommended. No.
But is there something that they can do more proactively? How can they? I think one of the things that I discussed with Anders Romar on the podcast earlier was about IT business alignment and how you enable that.
Yep.
Is there something in that space that you have seen work very well or not well?
Oh, definitely. And I think this is, again, back to the evolution. We cannot just be technology people. I mean, it's still our trade. It's still what we do. But we need to understand and speak the business language. Because I shouldn't be discussing speed of network or cloud A or B or something. A commercial person doesn't care. All that person cares about is, hey, what's our revenues, what's our number of customers through our different channels, whatever KPIs, and you need to understand them and you need to be able to discuss them, but also understand how can I help grow them or improve them. So I think this is where you're also seeing some of the more called traditional technologists, where some companies have kind of built out, like Gartner had back in the days, with you had a run operation and you had a grow, etc. Right? So you have some that are more just like, I'm running an operation. I think there'll be fewer of them. You still need to run your operation, but you need to do it in a different way, because today with automation, with your AI agents, that's going to help you out on your infrastructure. Infrastructure is code, the whole DevOps, the DevSecOps elements, etc. I think it requires an updated skill set also from our stall. And I think this is what we're seeing today, is that generational shift has been happening gradually over the past 10 years or so, but I think it's accelerating even further. If you're not in the business, if you're not walking the floors, if you're not in often and quick and very frequent dialogue with your peers out there, then you are, quote unquote, reduced to a delivery function. And with that, you just become a cost center. So I think it's also up to us as a CIO to basically make sure that we are there, that we can provide those inputs and we can participate in those conversations, but also that we're open to understand that just because we usually do this, but that's maybe not what's needed for the future for going forward.
In terms of the IT business alignment, how much do you think is structured versus unstructured, more like based on your personality and your relationships?
It's probably a good mix because, once you start getting involved into a day-to-day operation, which is not just your tech, running servers, running network, patching, all these things, those should be your hygiene factors. That's what we've been good at for years. We need to continue to be good at that, especially with, AI for bad now. Worm GPT and others. Now the bad guys are using AI as well. It's not just us wanting to do, good and more with AI. And that causes, all of a sudden you have a new vulnerability that comes in with an incredibly high score. If we just go back a few years, the Log4j, which killed, a lot of companies over the Christmas because you had to patch, vulnerable systems. So a lot of it is unstructured with what you get hit by. But you knowing and having a structured way of working with it, again, back to part of the elements of NIS2 effectively, is do you have your processes in place? Do you know how to react in these instances? Do you know your assets? I think if you go out anywhere and ask them, do you have a full registry of all of your assets that are connected to your network? And especially when you have closed networks, like I have also Space42, we've got, air-gapped, you have IoT networks, etc. Some places IoT is not really linked in under IT. It's probably sat out under a production. But where's those assets and how are they secured? What's your delivery chain, your connectivity, your business continuity? So I think you need to help putting some of the structure that we've known for years into a world which is very dynamic and very unstructured. Because they might have, a plan. But what happens if a production line goes down? That's never planned for, right? But how well can you help them? Just like we, mean time to recover for a server. How do you mean time to recover of a production line or a logistics or a commerce, whatever it might be?
That makes sense. Where from the IT organization as a whole, a lot of things is happening right now. Where should the IT organization put the focus?
Oh, and now's the challenge is saying everywhere, right? Because you can never truly be all over the place. And this is also what the CIO and the IT function has to be good at, aligning that with both the senior leadership, the board, but also the colleagues, the peers out in the organization is. And then sometimes I even recommend people reading the Phoenix Project, right? Because it's all about how much work in progress do you have. You can't start 10 things and expect it all to end overnight and all be good. At a point in time, you need to be focused and say, what are we doing? And execute it, get it done, move on to the next thing. Depending on your size of organization, right? Not everybody has 2,000 guys sitting in their, guys and girls sitting in their IT function. Hence meaning that what's your capacity? And this is again back to if IT is just acting and basically delivering as a cost center, as a delivery organization, you'll always be under pressure for how many FTEs can you have, what's your budget, can you reduce, etc. Whereas if you are truly in that conversation, how can you then actually help justify that, hey, if you invest over here, we're going to help drive the business over there, right? So what is your cost transparency? I've had a lot of good conversations by taking, a structured cost model and making it visible. What is your cost of running finance? Which is usually where you have your first pushback on your budgets, right? So if you know exactly how many systems, what's the cost of even running your finance systems? All of a sudden, you can have a different conversation with the senior leadership about, what's the cost of running your commercial? Is it too much or is it too little? If this is what you need to run and drive the growth of the company, drive the revenue, then your cost is justified. You can't just look at the cost in isolation, right? So I think this is it's a big part of what is very different today compared to what it was say 10 years ago, because it was different themes and different topics. It was a conversation about how many servers do we have? What does that matter? You should have the right capacity to serve exactly what you need as a business outcome. So I think this is where some of these lines they're getting a lot more blurry, and they're not just these handover elements as you've been used to having.
I think the cost transparency angle is quite interesting. I've seen many organizations where they're getting a lot of pushback from the business on cost without being able to argue why the cost is as it is.
Yep.
How have you approached that part of enabling cost transparency?
So basically, I've taken TBM, Technology Business Management, the model, and I've used it over a number of years. Some just go out and buy an expensive piece of software. I've brought it down a little deeper or closer in, a little more less complicated. It's basically for every single line item in my budgets. I know exactly what is the IT tower, what's the cost pool, what's the business function that it's driving in. So that I know, hey, if my license is for my ERP module on finance, then I know this is attributed to finance. A lot of people would just have maybe one line item, which is, here's your ERP license costs. I break them down, to the module level, because then I can start talking about how many systems, integrations, etc. do you have. So in finance, a lot of people say, no, we just have, a finance system. Yeah, but you have a lot of things. You've got accounts payable, receivable, you got your banking interfaces. You've got treasury. You've got a lot of different elements. All of that is different functionality. It might be different systems, but for sure it's different cost. It's the different skill sets that are needed to maintain just your ERP platform. And this is where I've seen a lot of their system, but it's just ERP. It's like, yeah, but ERP is a pretty big element. You can't put the finance person to maintain your HR modules, your procurement modules, your project portfolio modules, whatever modules that you're using on that platform. Equally, you can't take somebody who works, greatly with cloud and just say, hey, can you take care of devices? It's different skill sets. And this is where I think IT or the digital function of any company at times is a little misunderstood, because we have such a big breadth of capabilities. And I think this is where, if you talk about the cost transparency, but also justifying what should be the focus of an IT function, is understanding you have your enterprise service management, which is all about your support, but it's a lot about process automation, some orchestration, a lot of things that are lying in there that can really help drive something. But a lot of people conceive it as IT service management. But when you bring it to an enterprise service management, we're replacing various systems just by putting it on with the same way, enabling that directly to the end user at the palm of their hand in a different way than just saying, hey, it's system X, system Y, and so forth. We just want to have one pane of how they interact with this. You got your core technology, which consists of everything from your network to your cloud databases, but also to your digital workplace, which is also truly enabler. But a lot of people will see your infrastructure function as something that's your IT operations, the old I&O in Gartner terms. You have your data analytics. How can we enable a data-driven company if you don't have, your centralized data platform, your data engineers with your data pipelines? But with that comes data governance, data classification. I think if you do a survey out through just the top 100 Danish companies and ask them, even internationally, how many of them actually have a full-fledged implemented data classification? Some might do classification of emails and files, but do you classify application data? Do you have classification of data which is sat in your data platforms, and how are these data used? How are they accessed? So that then it itself is, and then of course you have your whole portfolio of different applications. Some are more niched, some are more generic, like your websites, your ERP, etc. But you'll always have these very niche to your company. So there's a lot of different capability areas that you need to have, and then you have your information security or your cybersecurity. Now we're seeing a lot more, and we're seeing the same now in the GCC, so in the Middle East region, how governance and compliance is coming more and more into the picture. It's becoming more outspoken by the authorities as well. So we have the equivalent of the Cybersecurity Council, from Denmark. We have the same down there. They're, voicing more and more, hey, you need to be in control of these things. You need to be able to demonstrate them. And that again comes back to, but if I don't know my assets, if I don't know where they are, am I maintaining them properly? How can I then go into that risk perspective? How can I help the board and the leadership make, well open, documented, advised decisions on where to invest, where to change? So this is where, again, the CIO role is, in my opinion, enabling the board to have a look at the risk. That's got very little to do with, running a server or a network, but it comes from knowing that we can help enlighten them on that.
Double-clicking a bit on the resilience part, because now recently we've had two major incidents across the globe with both Amazon and Azure going down, and Cloudflare as well. Well, how do you manage that?
Yeah, I think we all remember the wave where everybody was like, let's move everything to cloud.
Yeah.
I think the hybrid architecture is a lot more in focus today. I think quite a number of companies, a bunch of companies can definitely run major parts of what they have on cloud, right? And the workload is well designed for it. But you will find a ton of different companies where your value chain effectively cannot have, outages for X number of time, depending on how quickly Amazon or Cloudflare or whatever they recover. So that's where the hybrid environment obviously comes up. I have the same as Space42. I have a bunch of cloud services. We have a lot of things which, sovereign cloud stuff in the country, data being residing, but everything that has to do with our ground stations, data coming from the receiving side of the satellites, etc., will always come into an on-prem world. And then we can put it out to where it needs to sit, but the control of it is very important. It's the same if you look at production lines. Look at the Jaguar Land Rover, right? Cyber attack, and they didn't produce a vehicle for 5 weeks or something. I think somebody's looking at their resiliency and their architecture of, hey, how can this happen? Are we too vulnerable? We saw years back a big outage from Microsoft. You saw screens in airports and malls and everything that were just shining, blue screen. Do we believe that that's the right thing of just running all of that out on cloud, or should you have something that can switch to an on-prem world if something happens? And this is again back to justifying an investment. Is this so critical for you? Which again links back to the risk element, which is exactly what NIS2 is demanding, is that board and leadership has to understand, discuss, and decide on what is the risk appetite. I've been fortunate enough in previous places to actually have that conversation with the board. Say, what is our risk appetite? What are we willing to accept and for how long? And with that, you can go back and build that plan and say, okay, if you're willing to say these systems or these business processes, they can be out for 30 minutes, an hour, whatever, then I need to have them back up because it's starting to cost me money. But that then means that I need to then build an architecture, a maintenance, 24/7 call. Now we've had, the Christmas holidays. Who do you call on Christmas Day if something in your value chain breaks down? Do you have a 24/7 response set up for that? Or do you have, I've seen that in other places where you had support Monday to Friday from 8 to 4. Yeah, but what happens if you also run on weekends? Then you are not set up for having that continuity. So I think a lot of people were, and I know that across the globe, everybody that I'm in contact with, they had a few sweaty days with Cloudflare and Amazon, right? You take big services that you rely on.
Yeah.
Just the whole European conversation about, how dependent are we on these types of technologies? You have to have that conversation.
How for Space42, you also operate some critical assets. How are you addressing the risk part of managing that?
Basically, the way you would do with any asset, right? So do you have them logged? Do you know where they are? Do you know how old they are? Do you perform basically it's back to foundations, right? From the IT service management side of it. So do you know when you do changes to it, updates? Do you know how to react if an incident happens? Who do you call? Do you have a vendor? Do you have somebody internally? Basically back to the good old CMDB. It's funny how it still works, 40, 50 years after it was brought to life. But sometimes, and this is again back to your data quality. What we've done...
Just for those who don't know, can you describe what a CMDB is?
Yes, and it's very long. So it's your configuration management database, which basically just means your asset registry. What are all your technical assets throughout the company? I've had the fortune now, as we were merging two companies, is that we've been able to more or less build it up from scratch, so that we build it according to latest standards and versions, but also making sure that everything we brought over now, we're now registering and also discovering automatically in your network, but especially in closed-off networks and so forth, where you can't just scan. It would be the same in many companies if you have production lines, logistics sites, etc., where IoT devices, they're still technical assets. They still need to be maintained. So we do it just like anybody else. We know our assets. We run our processes on it. And that also means that from a risk perspective, if I have something which is maybe 3 years old, I'm expecting it to live 6 years, but all of a sudden we start seeing an increase in number of outages or incidents with that particular asset. It allows me to then have that conversation with either the officer of that area, a vendor, or whatever it might be, to say, is this asset actually going to live? Do we just have a bad asset? This can be either physical, hardware, but it can also be applications. I mean, a lot of applications are building on a lot of different components, but a subcomponent, like the Log4j example, you had universities. I know there was a couple of British universities that had systems that were out for 6 months because they were waiting for the vendor of a system to fix its problems with an underlying component, which was actually from another provider that they were using, which is, again, do you know your assets? With that, obviously, we do business impact assessments and everything and say, what is the impact if this particular system is out? And then we can go back and help the leadership to have that conversation about what is then our risk appetite and how do you want to mitigate these risks that are coming up. I know that there are companies that still see their biggest risk is, what's my stock price going to be? It's like, I'm pretty sure there's other things that will influence your stock price before it's the stock price itself, right? So I think that's really where, I mean, for me, it's common sense, right? It's what we've been doing for many years, but it's not just, now it's surfacing a lot more because of compliance, because of how interlinked we are and how dependent we are on technology compared to back in the days.
Can you tell me a little bit more about Space42 and what that's all about?
Absolutely. So Space42 is basically the intersection between satellite communication and what's called the terrestrial network. So what we know as mobile networks and so forth here on ground. So we offer basically across 127 markets, satellite communication services, speech, data, secure communications, tactical communications, channels and possibilities that we can have. This basically allows us in near real time, also with a combination of a lot of AI that we have, to provide a mean of being connected that a lot of people are depending on as well, right? So basically, we're two business areas or business functions. So we have space services, which is the satellite communication. We have one of the most advanced satellites, Thoriya 4, flowing out in orbit. Those are geostationary satellites out there. They provide that's for the data and the comms. And that is really the heart of the core of one of the companies that was merged back then. Then we have Smart Solutions, which is geospatial. We just earlier this year, we launched the next 4 of what's called a SAR constellation. Those are a lower orbit, and we actually use them to do Earth observation. But they're not taking traditional photos. They're using radar. So it doesn't matter whether it's cloudy or whatever it is. So through radar, we actually get high resolution photos of Earth. And then combining that with AI, that gives us a near real time to what happens where. So that's a very unique angle or data point to come in. Combine that then with ground mapping, for instance. That means we can provide services to autonomous vehicles. We also have a few of ourselves, but also our geospatial platform, which is called GIQ, which basically allows you to use AI to recognize objects, changes to different areas. You can use that either for, let's say you have deforestation, floodings. You could have a forest fire, wildfire. You could have like the west coast in Denmark, which is deteriorating due to the sea. And you can use it for, border. What's happening? Do you have any changes? So there's a lot of very, very cool elements of how you can use something which is floating high above us. We also have something which is called HAPS, which is basically a big fixed wing drone.
All right.
Which will hover, has solar panels on top, will hover for quite a long time, where you can fix a payload. So let's say you have an area where you need to do surveying of, for instance. You can put that up and it will be surveying that area. But obviously technologies like this could be used for remote areas. If you have disasters or something where you can't access, you'd be able to fly something up there and hover and give you near real-time insights to what's going on. So there's a lot of angles and you could say ways you can connect the world. We recently went into a big partnership with Viasat in a company set up called Equitas, which basically is how can you provide a direct-to-device communication. So we all know if you're out somewhere and all of a sudden your cell phone reception is bad, but then you could actually switch to still being provided your communication, but then through satellite, seamlessly without necessarily having to have special devices, etc. in there. So we provide a whole suite of different products and technologies that can be used for landborne, airborne, also on ocean. If you have boats or rigs or whatever you might have out there that needs to have connectivity, we can provide that as well.
I think a very publicly known company that does something similar is probably Starlink, right?
Yep.
Is that a comparable company, or are you different in many ways? Or
well, you can say Starlink is a lower orbit, higher density, and they provide purely data. We can provide a lot of other channels of communication as well, highly encrypted, military grade, and for military use, etc. as well, where Starlink is quote unquote it's the flying internet, which is obviously good for a remote area. But again, that's people that are only if they're out there in that space. So you could say we can provide somewhat comparable. Who knows what will happen over time? But for now, we're not competing with Starlink. That would with two different models and two different business areas that we're providing in. Obviously, we can provide data as well, but it's a lot about being able to have telecommunication, being able to establish highly encrypted and secure communications across basically major parts of the world. So very different in itself. We don't consider ourselves Starlink, but of course we have certain capabilities.
Okay. There's a huge focus on space technology right now. Where do you think that this is taking us? What are some of the exciting opportunities or trends that's happening right now?
Well, I think this is, again, as I said before, right? How can we get as near real time as possible with something? It's easy to understand what we have on ground, what you can see. We have a lot of sensors and everything. But what happens when you can actually take something which is like the Earth observation elements and bring the data from that, combine that through ground observations? It could be your LiDAR mapping, could be whatever, and then use the AI on top of that to basically drive some of these, you can say, the intelligence from it. But with that, you come into also this sovereignty. we have this big conversation going on globally now, right? Geopolitically, where do you store your data? We've got GDPR. We've got the same in the Middle East and across the countries. You got US, you got India, got China, who all has these things. So how do you combine some of these things with still being connected, being a global world, and still being able to put this into a sovereign construct as well? And I think this is where, for instance, some of the work that we're doing in Equitas is something that's going to help the connectivity element of it, but it still has to be, for the users of it, has to be in a shape or form that they know it's safe, it's secure, it's something that can scale, for instance. And I think this is where, when we did the whole everything goes on cloud, the world just became one in overnight almost, right? Didn't matter where your data was stored. Now, big parts of your data governance and your data classification, your local legislations is really about where's your data stored. GDPR, right, has to be stored within the EU. I have the same for any PII, so personal information data has to be stored in the UAE. So I need to secure that the solutions that we're putting in, again, back to our previous part, how do you interact with the business partners? So if they fall in love in a solution, it's not hosted within your region maybe. So can you actually use such solution, or do you need to engineer it in a different way, right? And I think one of the other elements, autonomous vehicles. This is where we're seeing it a lot more. We know in the US, they have a lot of cars that are driving more and more, but still a lot of people are talking about what happens when it becomes, thoroughly, spread out. We have some autonomous vehicles that are driving around in the UAE. We will probably see a lot more. We will see a lot more, right? Because there's such a big demand for that evolution of transportation as well. Not just for people, but for cargo, for all sorts of different services, right? You can have your pizza delivered through an autonomous vehicle instead of a person in a car, right? So I think this is where we're doing a lot of work together with both with Core42, with Microsoft, etc. Again, on this, how can we take some of the data and provide the sovereignty about it, that's a sovereign cloud, with some of that satellite information that we get down, so that we can provide basically a digital foundation or a data element for how we can advance, autonomous mobility as well in the country. So there's a lot of very interesting angles where space tech is actually coming closer to what we do on Earth, but it's a new way of looking at Earth, which is super cool.
I'm curious to hear more about how because this is it's a high-tech product that you are providing to your customers. From a more internal perspective, how do you then create a tech stack to support that?
Like any technology areas, there are certain things that are relatively niched in the technology, right? So part of the stack is obviously done through some of our big partners and providers of the satellites, some of the ground station equipment, and so forth. When you talk about stuff like, quantum key distribution, etc., to protect also that you're not, which is another element of it. So I think it's like anybody else, you need to keep up with your stack, right? And again, justify what do you have and how do you have it, knowing your assets, right? How to sweat them and how to gain full value out of them. I think it's a good combination of things that are very specifically designed that our colleagues in the technologies area for the satellite services, the space services team that they're running. But then, of course, it connects into the network, and we help and ensure and take over what data needs to be going where. But also, some of these elements are very air-gapped in themselves, which means I don't even want to go there and touch them, right? Because that, again, you open an attack vector potentially into your stack. So it's very carefully architected. It's very carefully maintained. And it's very much... what is, you could say, your satellite network, what is your commercial network, and what is your corporate network. So it's also coming back again to having that holistic function that touches the entire value chain, is knowing where to deploy what. and when. So the tech stack is a lot of fun. I host GPUs and everything to train our AI models that we built on top of the satellite data that comes from the Earth observation, for instance, so that they can provide that through our geospatial platform, which is a very hyper advanced version of Google Earth, effectively. Right, you can do a lot of different elements with that. Both enterprise grade, but also if you're a smaller size, more like a pay-to-go model for it as well. And then, of course, for government entities as well that might have certain needs, which are obviously, again, put into a different architecture, which is a little more air-gapped, but they still need a bunch of the information that comes.
I guess data is a big part of this as well, right? So how are you managing the data part of all of this? You mentioned it a couple of times also with the classification and all of that, right? But I'm just curious to hear more.
And you're right. I mean, we are, and actually it's quite interesting, the word bayanat, which was one of the previous company names, actually means data in Arabic. So they were very, driven out of data and building smart solutions based on data, which is, our smart solutions division today. There is a bunch of data, and this is again about how to receive it, both from what's coming from the Earth observation, from satellites, etc. That obviously comes through the technology and the networks that it's built for. From there on, how do you process it? Where can it go? If it's air-gapped, it needs to be processed within that part of the network. Do you have data that you need to bring from those and into something that gets processed and then maybe gets published in our geospatial platform like GIQ? So it's a good mix. And then, of course, you have all your corporate data, your transactional data, etc., which comes. So it's different types of data, and they're being dealt with in different ways depending on, again, where in the networks are they coming down. Some of them needs to aggregate, and then you can do your processing on them. Some you can almost, fast forward in a near real time. So how do you, if you put it into it's just a good mix. Really, it's everything in from what you would consider your traditional data platform where you can do your BI analytics on to near real time processing of satellite data that needs to come to a certain purpose.
You also mentioned that you have your own GPUs for training your models,
yes.
AI models.
Yeah.
How are you, because you're also part of G42, like a big AI focus in the UAE. How are you implementing AI across the value chain in Space42?
I don't think a day goes by where not somebody's asking about what we're doing, obviously enabling it in our products, but also very much to our internal workforce, all the colleagues. So this is everything from, how do you have your chat interaction, Copilot but also your AI agents. So how can I make sure that my infrastructure guys effectively, instead of spinning up machines and maintaining an infrastructure, how can I basically transform them into building agents that will do that for them? So this is, again, part of that talent shift as well. We have a lot of collaborations also with externals on bringing in talent that has some of these skills. With the universities, we're blessed with having basically one of the only AI universities in the world, dedicated AI university, Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence in the UAE as well. So we have a good feeding chain in as well. So we're getting a lot of people in that has this as a good thinking. But yeah, your AI is in everything, right? This is everything from your CCTV cameras to your Copilots to how you interact with your infrastructure to how can our AI models help our users get even more value out of our geospatial platforms. And I think this is one area where the UAE has been very unique. I mean, even back in 2017, how many were even discussing AI in 2017? The national AI strategy and vision was effectively drafted back then. So we have a dedicated Minister of AI each of the ministries, for instance, in Dubai, have a dedicated AI officer. We have a bunch of, in my day-to-day living in the country, AI elements where the speed cameras aren't just taking speed. They can actually see if you're riding, talking on your phone, seatbelt, a lot of different things that it's incorporating. How can I interact through voice chatbot with the police, for instance? All sorts of different things that are really embedded. So it's a very high focus, and they were very early. And yes, with the whole G42, so the Core 42 building Stargate, I mean, the world's by far largest AI data center. And for those, when it's done, to put into a size perspective, it will be around 26 square kilometers. That's the equivalent of Albertslund, which, for those knowing how big Albertslund is, that's the size that is being built.
Yeah.
And that's obviously, the UAE is a global AI hub, and have had that as a vision. That's why so many of these investments, thousands and thousands of AI companies that are in the country. So AI is very much there. We have a lot of different events in the country as well. AI Everything, where I think it was like 5,000 or so companies that attended last year. So it's huge, huge. I have AI is being spoken about almost every day.
Why do you think that they are betting so heavily on AI?
I think, there's a very beautiful quote on that the UAE will be developed over the next 50 years using intelligence and data. Imagine having a country like the UAE that basically was founded 54 years ago to what it is today, and compare that to other places that have taken thousands of years to become to what we are today. So they're used to an evolution that just goes fast. It's all about execution, right? Because that's part of being not just in the game, but being ahead of the game. And geographically very well positioned between Europe, Africa, Asia, etc. Right? So it's a natural and a big hub anyhow for both nationalities, the growth of the country in itself, but also being able to provide technology components like AI processing. This can either be training your own models. This can be utilizing AI features, services. So I would say it's a big deal of it is the ambition of the country and the leadership of the country, which has been very, very clear and is on a very frequent basis is something that is being addressed.
How I think it's interesting how they can create like this national strategy for AI and then just implement it across the board. What can other governments learn from this? How could they approach something similar?
I think it's an inspirational case, actually. We've always had this saying about who innovates, who regulates, and who copies, and everything, right? I think that picture is probably up for discussion again. But I think the word execution is actually the biggest difference. Having worked internationally for many years, right, but also obviously based in the European region, being in the Middle East and in particular down there in the UAE is execution is just the thing, right? We don't necessarily, if we know this is the right thing to do, there's no reason to discuss this for eternity. Let's do it.
It's more first principle thinking.
Well, it's still well thought through, but it's not overthought for years, because this is, again, how do you fail but fail fast? Again, the agile methodologies and thinking, right?
But applied to a country instead of just
exactly. And this is probably part of the braveness of the leadership as well. How many times have we for years and years discussed whether to extend a road somewhere here in Denmark, right? Why are we still discussing it? Do it. And it's the same. Doesn't matter whether it's infrastructure or whether it's stuff like AI. And I think this is where the region in Europe in particular really could benefit from actually getting some inspiration from outside of Europe. Not just the Middle East, but in other places where we can actually pick up a lot of things. Obviously, the way that things are done are just, but it's okay to have something that doesn't work the first time around. But you're in it, you're going, you will learn, you'll get it there, right? When you think about some of the first AI services that we saw, I mean, we saw GPT models that were, spitting out very foul language after 3 prompts. It has evolved. I mean, if you look at some of the latest versions of GPT 5.2, Claude, whatever they are, they've evolved. And I think they realized that this is going to be what's going to help develop and grow the country. I mean, UE has an ambition also of being able to continuously attract people to come and live and work there, grow. All the industry verticals that are present in the country, right, from banking to logistics to obviously tourism is a big thing. They're not living off, Dubai is not living off its oil, for instance, right? They know that, so they're diversifying. We have incredible, some of the biggest research centers on solar panels, which makes sense. We have a lot of sun. We've got nuclear power facilities, something a lot of people don't know. But they've just said, we need to evolve, we need to develop. And that's what makes the execution engine and the style and the thinking makes a big difference. And I think that is what I would hope that could inspire. Take ourselves here in Denmark, right? I think we're a highly digitized society in many ways. But I think we should be able to do more, do faster, and also get even more value out of some of the projects that are running here as well. They all run over time and budget usually, right? But let's get something out there that works, that starts generating something.
I think what I noticed from working in Saudi Arabia was they have something similar to the National Strategy for AI. They have the Vision 2030, and all of the people that we engage with during the projects that we've done there, they are all kind of bought into the national strategy. So they're just, as soon as everything can be tied to one of the objectives, then they're all in on that. Is that the same? Is that also something that you experience in UAE?
Yes, very much so. And I think this is, look at the investments and the partnerships that's happening under the G42 umbrella, right? So with Core42, with Microsoft investing, $1.5 billion into Core42. Brad Smith now serving as part of Core42 on the board there. I think a lot of these it's attractive for companies to come and partner because the country is ready. The country is willing and they're visionary in terms of this is what's going to happen. How many times have we had news about data centers that were to be built in Denmark? Then it didn't happen. Now it's coming. It's not coming, etc. Microsoft recently announced that something will happen here in Denmark. But again, it's the speed of how things are happening and the partnerships. Whether it's NVIDIA, Oracle, Microsoft, they're all there. And I think it's the same. Again, you have countries that are newer or shorter, younger in age, compared to, take Denmark. We're very well advanced, but also a mature company or country. Sorry, but that maybe also means that we've gotten a little, on our heels. We're not on our toes. And I think it's part of that region is they want to evolve. They want to be the ones that are out there helping. We have M42, which is the whole healthcare, the amount of work that they're doing in there as well with AI, with devices and everything on how to basically revolutionize healthcare as well. It's just, it's really inspiring to learn about and to read about. Same thing that we're doing with, Space42. We want to basically take space communication, connectivity, take that to a whole new level compared to what it is today.
So how does this national focus on AI impact your work as the CIO for Space42?
Well, you could say I don't need to talk to people and tell them what AI is, because I'm being demanded it.
Yeah.
Our MD basically, I mean, he'd send out an email, saying, "Hey, we're at the end of the year. It's been a good year, etc. What's AI? What's your plans for AI even into 26, right?" So it's just very, very much open in there. So obviously it affects my day-to-day work, because I need to be able to provide it. I have a business that says, "Hey, I need to train my AI models. I need to have the right GPU capacity. I need to make sure that it runs, etc." And it's a fun technology to run for them as well. But it becomes very, very apparent that you're not just talking about, "Hey, I need to store data in a database somewhere." Now it's something where, as you're getting close to this near real-time processing of Earth observation data, for instance, well, they need to be able to process that data properly in a point in time to train the model, to update so that the value comes out into the product. So I don't think a week goes by where I'm not having a conversation with my colleague in that field about, "Hey, what do we need to do? How do we need to grow this? What is your need, your compute capacity, your demand basically for 26? And how can we deliver that to you?" It's my boss on a weekly basis. When I sit with him, he's like, "So where are we with enabling everything from AI agents on ERP to providing the GPUs for the business to how are we looking at making sure that what we need to do using, even AI to classify our data? Can we use Microsoft technologies? Whatever is out there, right? It's very much being asked for by almost anybody, which obviously makes it challenging, but also fun.
Cool. My final question, now that you are, let's call it a seasoned IT leader.
The gray hair, thank you.
Experienced, of course. What would be your advice or recommendation to the future technology leaders?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because basically I think what has brought me through my years and hopefully still will bring me many years onwards is the fact that there is no status quo. I mean, I've done a couple of times where I've had the pleasure of also working with designing brand new operating models, org charts, etc. You can never have something where, I usually have this, or this is my way that I want it, because everything is going to be challenged on a day-to-day basis. So I've even tried delivering a completely blank org chart back to leadership, saying, "This is how we should be working. This is how we should be organized to facilitate that way of working. Now you guys need to decide who you want to lead those capabilities," for instance. Is not being afraid at times to even say that, "Hey, your success criteria is effectively to try to eliminate yourself." Because if you can do that, then hopefully the company sees that there's a lot of value in you and you can be used for a lot of things, because things are not going to be stable. So I would say, don't be afraid of challenging the status quo. Continue to be curious as to how things could be done in different ways. And I think is not just looking at the technology, but realizing how the technology is delivering value for the company, right? I've always said that I don't go to work and spin up a server just to, do IT for the sake of IT. I have a fun job because I get to play with technology, but that's not what's driving the value of the organization. And I think this is as well where a lot of both aspiring and more seasoned or experienced technology leaders are in there today. But and this is hopefully where the rest of the company, the boards and others will see that, hey, this is actually a core skill that is required, not just to drive a digital function, but to actually grow the company. I would love to see a lot of CIOs, change course, COOs, commercial people, whatever it might be, right? There are a few examples of where that's been done already, but because of your profile and your experience, use it.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kenneth. That was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.